Welcome to the Encouragement Engineering Podcast. We help people to combat the negativity that inundates our daily lives with a positive perspective and positive action. Today's guest is James Smith. Now, our guest truly believes in second chances. He's a former compulsive gambler, ex-offender that served 5 years in the Federal Correctional Institute for armed bank robbery, a former practicing attorney, a former North Carolina State Bar-approved sponsor of continuing legal education for 11 years, and he's a retired pastor of a historical Missionary Baptist Church in Durham County, North Carolina, where he served for almost 32 years. James is also an author of 3 books: Deal by Me, A Golden Opportunity Blown; Deal by Me, second edition, A Self-Evaluation; and Come Let Us Reason Together. And James has overcome cancer and severe back surgeries as well. So if anybody can help us today with positivity and encouragement, I think it will be, James Smith. So please welcome to the show, Dr. James Smith. James, thank you so much for being a guest today. I really appreciate your time.
You're welcome. Glad
Great.
to be on your show.
Well, thank you. Thank you. Well, if you can, let's get into that because your bio just touches on it, but let's tell us how you got to where you are today. I know and it's a rocky road, but I think people will get to know you a little better.
Well, let me begin by just telling you that I grew up in a family of no brothers and sisters, but a very warm family of lots of cousins, aunts, uncles. We grew up on a farm, and of course, my granddaddy was fortunate to have about 500 acres of land. And so we farmed. We had all kind of animals. We had all kind of crops. I finished high school and went off to college, and end of my junior year, I enrolled in law school, and so I received my bachelor's of commerce and business, and 1 year of law school at the same time. And I finished law school, came out. Eventually, I passed the bar.
Wow.
In 1971, and I started practicing law in my hometown. At the time that I started practicing law, I was the first and only African-American lawyer practicing in the state of North Carolina. Well, no, I don't mean North Carolina, in my hometown.
Uh-huh.
But I was also the youngest African-American lawyer practicing law in the state of North Carolina.
Wow.
At that time, I was 26 years old. I practiced law, bought an apartment, and we moved our office to Henderson, which is about 19 miles. So for a while, we had an office in Henderson and an office in Lewisburg, which is my hometown.
Okay.
In the interim, I kind of got off into gambling, and gambling really kind of was what brought me to end my law practice, because I lost everything that I had. Lost my wife of 5 years. Properties that I had accumulated, I lost, and I lost my focus. That's the best way to say it. I lost my focus, and long story behind it, but I thought about suicide. Didn't go through that. Started thinking about my mom as an only child, and that kind of kept me from going down that road. But I did something still very stupid. I ended up robbing a bank. I received a 15-year sentence. But prior to that time, after I committed the crime, I was sent to Northridge Mental Hospital for a 6-week observation. And of course, that's kind of where I really came to the realization of what was facing me, and that I know I needed to make a change in my life. So it was really during this 3-week period while I was at the mental hospital that brought me to kind of where I am now. I began to think about what I was doing and how I got to where I was and what made me rob this bank. And of course, I just made certain commitments that I wasn't going that way anymore. I was finished with gambling. I was finished with drinking. I was finished with all the stuff that I thought got me there. So I was at ease when I knew I was going to receive some time. Uh, it it didn't even really bother me that much because I had already made my mind up that I wanted to get it behind me and start my life over again because I felt comfortable uh, in doing that because I knew where I was. And so I came out after 5 years, went to a halfway house, and from the halfway house, I got a job. I went to the courthouse as soon as I got to the halfway house. So lawyer that I knew and who knew me and didn't ask me any questions. He just told me to come to work the next day. I started working the next day in his office. Uh, and of course, from there on, I, was continuously feeling the desire to minister. And so I went to seminary.
Wow.
I eventually, I didn't do it in 3 years because I remarried in this process. So, but I did go to seminary. I eventually received my master's of divinity degree. I continued and received my doctor of ministry.
Wow.
And of course, during this whole process, I got out in '86, and in '91, I got a call to the church, and of course, I stayed at that church for 2 months short of 32 years. Just retired back in December, and in the process, while I was confined, I started writing. It was kind of a therapy for me. So I didn't. It wasn't anything. I wasn't even thinking about a book, but I had written. I knew about 400 pages of just therapy. Starting off how I got to this, my law practice, and what have you. And when I got out, I had it. So I gave copies of it to lots of folks. And one of my friends who read it said, "Oh, you need to put this in a book." So that's how I got to write my first book.
Good.
And so I wrote that, and it went well. I had a couple of book signings, and during COVID, uh, I began sitting around the house, nothing to do. So I wrote a second edition to the first book. Okay, and then I, because of my legal background, I became moderators for the General Baptist State Convention in North Carolina. And the president at that time wanted me to work with churches that was going through conflict. So I started doing workshops, and that took me all across the state doing church conflict workshops. And of course, fortunately, somebody was talking about, well, you're doing so well. I think lawyers would like to hear your story and would like it. So I applied to the North Carolina State Bar. I honestly, I didn't think I was get it. That was part of my problem. I didn't feel that I was worthy. But when I applied, I finally got approved as a sponsor to teach ethics, mental health, and substance abuse to lawyers across the state of North Carolina. And so I did that for 11 years. I just quit doing that when COVID came. And, I didn't want to continue to travel. So I just gave it up. And that's basically, my story. After retiring, well, just about 3 or 4 months before I retired, I decided that I wanted to continue my ministry. So that's when I decided to start a podcast.
Right.
And so I've now been doing a podcast for about 6 months, going really great. I'm doing on an average of about 3 or 4 a week. So it's exciting. So that's kind of where I am now. I have also began to put together uh, a I call it a legal awareness workshop that's dealing with conflict, forms, and what have you, that I can do virtual.
Oh, cool.
with churches across the state.
Hmm.
So I'm beginning to move that along with my podcast, and so I mean, just enjoying life. That's where I am now.
Well, that's great. I mean, and you think about it, it's the mindset, and you said a couple things in that description you talked about was the journaling and how that it seemed to help you. Like you said, it was a mental therapy, if you will. How do you think did I can imagine the journaling help. What was your mindset going through this as well? It seemed like you were comfortable before you actually got the sentence, that you were okay with basically paying your dues, if you will, and getting through it. What was how was the mindset going over that idea that you made a mistake that is actually going to put you away for a while?
Well, I actually, it's very interesting because when I was uh, right after the crime, I was placed under a $100,000 bond,
Mhm.
and the next day, uh, they took me before the judge because they obviously thought I'd had a mental breakdown.
Mhm.
No lawyer I was an accomplished lawyer in North
Yeah.
Carolina, so no lawyer would do what I did. So it they had to think that something was wrong.
Right.
So when they sent me to the mental hospital, I think that was my turning point
Okay.
because I had a chance to just reflect. How in the world could you do what you did? You had a good law practice, but in between all of this, I lost my first wife because of the gambling. I had two partners. We kind of split up because of the gambling. So I was dealing with all of this. And so I just came to the realization, and meditated. I think my faith kicked in.
Hmm.
My mom was very committed Christian, and
Okay.
thinking about her, and she talked. And I just came to the conclusion that look, I can't live like this.
Yeah.
My life has to be different. And so I just said, I want to go ahead and get it all over with. Whatever the judge gives me, I'm okay with it. I'm going to do the best I can while I'm there, not in trouble. I'm going to do what I got to do to get out. And when I get out, I'm just going to start trying to pull my life back together. When I got
Hmm.
out, that's what my mom told me. She told me when I got out, she says, son, you can go and lie down in the ditch if you want to. You can go and put your head in the sand if you want to. But all folk gonna do is come kick more sand on you and rub your head further into the sand. She
Yeah.
said, but if you want to get up, they will give you a helping hand. And and that's what I did. I just
Yeah.
said, look, I'm not looking back, I'm going forward. And that's what I did.
And that's great. That's a great reminder for people. We need to always look forward. I mean, you can't do anything about what was. It's in the past. It's written in the books. But let's move forward because there's more opportunity in front of you.
Oh yeah.
It's such a, if you will, uh, it's a hard thing to go through, but it's a great lesson of that idea of, hope, positivity, growth, and what's in the future for us.
I'm gonna share this with you. I tell people this sometimes and they laugh at me. I tell them that actually my 5 years in prison added 5 years to my life. And
Yeah.
they wonder, said, how? I say, number one, I ate well. I exercise every day.
Yeah.
I took care of myself.
Yeah.
I didn't have no stress or nothing, and I really believe that.
Wow.
I think it probably took some years off my mom's life.
Yeah.
Because she was obviously stressed, and I hated that part. But as for me, I had gotten up and I was ready to go.
Yeah. That's something. Wow. Well, it's interesting because I mean that's a hard situation to go through. So do you have a belief that there's always good in every situation? Something to learn, if you will?
Yeah,
Hmm.
I do feel that way. I just think that whatever we go through, if we look at it in a positive way, we can learn from it.
Yeah.
And so, from that viewpoint, I do think that in every situation, there is some good that can come out of it.
Yeah.
Uh, and when I think about my own life, I see that.
Yeah.
I don't know anything that you could do to worse than what I did. But look, it made me a totally better person.
Right.
I know I'm not the person that I used to be. Always, I was not boasting, but I was an excellent lawyer. If you talk with people who knew me back then, they would tell you that I was. But gambling had just kind of got a hold of me, and I lost my focus.
Yeah.
That's all I can say. I
Wow.
lost it.
Yeah, well, God has a good way of turning you around and, and puts you in the right direction. So,
Mhm.
amen to that. So, do you think, on your personal perspective, that that has a lot of weight on your current situation, on how you've grown and everything like that?
Uh, do I think? Can you say that again now?
Yeah, sure. Do you think you're like, is your personal perspective then had a big impact on where you are today and how you learned from that situation and
Oh yeah,
grow? Yeah.
oh yeah, sure. The last book that I told you I
Uh,
wrote during COVID. I sat down and I titled it. It was a second edition of my first book. My first book was "Deal by Me: A Golden Opportunity Blown," and I think
right.
you'll understand that.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
the deal by me came from the gambler. I don't want the next hand, so
Right.
I'm
Okay.
finished with it.
Okay.
So it was "Deal by Me: A Golden Opportunity Blown." Talking about my law practice, how I just blew that. But during the COVID time, when I wrote my second book, it was "Deal by Me: A Second Edition." uh, it was a self evaluation.
Right.
That's when I really went through all of what I got from what I went through.
Right.
I just did a self reflection. I reflected on it, and I just wrote about it. And there were some things that I really talked about and shared that I really thought was very important.
Right.
I talked about in the book things like the darkest hour was just before dawn.
Yeah.
That you need to always confront the source. How an idle mind is a devil's workshop. How I talked about even how you play with fire and you will get burned.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and how and also how to accept responsibility. And telling people who will read my book that crime does not pay. And and one of the things I thought was most important was to share with them that if you are, if something is consuming you, and that was I did that as a result of my gambling because it started get consuming me. I said, step back from it,
Right.
and don't let your circumstance be an excuse, and I did say, in my book that there is some good in every situation. So and 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 I came to the conclusion that I really wanted to point out to you is that I came to the conclusion that I really was not a compulsive gambler as I thought I was at the beginning. Now this is going to be interesting. And the reason I came to that conclusion was because uh, during the time that I was out, I wanted to go to, it was a Gambling Anonymous place,
Right.
okay? And I wanted to talk to the guys about gambling because I wanted to share with them, where I was and how you get there. And when I talked with the uh, manager of the Gambling Anonymous house, it was called Amityville, and he asked me, he said, "Are you still a gambler?" And I said, "No, I don't gamble anymore. I've quit." And
Right.
he said to me, he said, "Well, I don't know if the guys would be interested in hearing from you, uh, because we take the position that once a gambler, kind of like alcoholic, once a gambler, always a gambler."
Right.
And I just knew that was not me, you
Right.
know. So in my self-reflection, I came to the conclusion, uh, as I was doing my self-evaluation for my last book, I came to the conclusion that what my problem was, I was afraid to fail.
Okay.
I was
Wow.
afraid to fail.
Okay.
I had been this outstanding lawyer on top of the world, and then all of a sudden I lost everything, and I just couldn't see myself going there. And I thought that if I could recoup, that I could come back, throw my head back like nothing happened. I
Right.
know now that's not
Yeah.
the case, but that's
Right.
the way I was feeling then. So that was what I concluded. So I think, and I tell people that I thought in the beginning in my first book that I was a compulsive gambler, but I concluded later that that's not what I was. I I was afraid to fail.
Wow. And I think that resonates with a lot of people because that is something that we if you will, worry about. But we all, we all have failures. We make mistakes, and we can grow from it. Great point with that. Do you think that your time, you went to ministry after prison? Do you think that led to that, or do you think you just learned from that and you found a stronger faith with your faith?
Now I'm going to tell you something that really is really interesting. My faith actually took hold while I was out on bond.
Okay.
Like I tell you, my mom was a really dedicated Christian. She taught with me. Folk came by the house. They prayed with me. Ministers came and taught with me. And I just started meditating about my life. And I just felt the calls. So I went to my pastor and told him about what was going on with me. And I hadn't gone to prison at this time. I even gone to court. I told him what was going on with me. And he said to me, he said, well, he said, looks like you feeling the call. And he said, if you're feeling the call, you need to go out on and accept it. You can't run from it. And so I told him, I said, well, I'd like to wait until I get out, because I knew I was going to get some time. It was always possible that was going to, and I was going to plead guilty because I was guilty. And so I told him, I said, well, let me wait until I get out, and then I'll do my initial sermon. And he said, well, I don't know if you want to do that, because the Lord might just have something for you to do while you are confined. Because I told him I was going to get some time. And so he set my date for my initial sermon up on a Saturday, first Saturday in January. And you're not going to believe this when I tell you, first Saturday in January, before a packed house in Lewisburg, North Carolina. I preached my initial sermon, and I went to court that Monday.
Wow.
And I got my 15-year sentence on that Monday.
Wow.
But I never regret it, because when I went in, I got the best job. I had worked in the chaplain's office. And this is something you really is going to have a hard time believing. They say that I was perhaps one of the first inmates that got a chance to leave the prison on my own. Wow. I flew to two seminars, one that was sponsored by a prison fellowship, one to Stahlstown, Pennsylvania, and another one to Washington, D.C.
Wow.
And came back.
Yeah.
And it was of such that they wouldn't even let other inmates know this about me. They thought I was going back to court somewhere. They would let them know that I was, had left and went to a seminar.
Wow.
That's just how I was being blessed.
Wow.
I never, prison to me was, and I don't want to say this because this kind of downgrade things a little bit. That sound a little crazy. But it really was almost kind of like almost a 5-year vacation, except I couldn't go anyplace else.
Yeah.
I was behind walls,
Right.
But that's just where it was. I had best jobs, worked in the warden's office. I worked in the instructor's office as a tutor.
Okay.
And also later in the chaplain's office. Yeah.
Wow.
So great job.
Yeah. Wow. That's something. Well, James, where can people find out more about you, your website, your books? Let's tell them where they can get a hold of you, because you've done some great stuff, some great work, and I want to make sure they get a hold of you.
Well, thank you so much. Well, they can contact me from my website, which is www.dealbyme.com, which is also the name of my books. I've got 3 books. One is Deal by Me, A Golden Opportunity to Blown, and Deal by Me Second Edition, a self-evaluation. And because I was doing conflict across the state, church conflict, I have a book dealing with that too, which is entitled Come Let Us Reason Together. So all 3 of those books are on my website, can be purchased on my website. You can also purchase them from Amazon.com and either also from Barnes and Nobles. All you got to do is just pull them up, James W. Smith.
Okay.
Pull the name up, James W. Smith, you get it. If they want an autograph copy, then they just go to my website and order the book they want, and I will autograph it and send it to them.
That's great. Well, we'll make sure we put that all in the show notes so people have that information. I thank you for what you do for this world. Thank you for your positive attitude. Thank you for who you are and everything you've contributed. I really appreciate you taking the time and being a guest on the Encouragement Engineering podcast today.
No problem. Thank you so very much for having me.
Thank you, James. Appreciate it. You have a great day.
Thank you.
All right.